Mindbend. Non-ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness for Mindbend Creative.
Andrea, thanks for coming onto the podcast today. We've been waiting to do this conversation for a while. You're one of the first people that I connected with when I first moved to Los Angeles and began talking to about Mindbend. Let me just ask you at the onset here, when we talk about consciousness, what are we talking about, Andrea Monier?
Well, start out with a bang.
Yeah, it started with a bang.
I think consciousness is actually all that exists, really. It's what we're experiencing right now. It's life. And when you say altered states of consciousness, what we're saying is we're experiencing life outside of our normal day-to-day realm, which is what we experience, what you mentioned, psychedelics, breath work, sex, performance, meditation, where we go to different brainwave states, where we can kind of bypass some of the egoic structure of our brain. Yeah.
Brainwave states. So we have the ability to change intentionally the functionality of our machine.
We do. We have, there's many tools, and we can actually consciously change our brainwave state. Specifically, meditation is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you decided at some point that you wanted to be able to continue your studies of meditation. You come from a performing background.
Yeah.
Motion pictures, on-camera work, behind the scenes, storytelling, right? Is it accurate to say that not too long ago you began an extended journey into the meditation space as a student, and then moving in towards being a teacher as well?
Yeah, I think sometimes we go through our life and we don't really see how our path's going to unfold in the moment. And I think I started meditating probably about 8 years ago, but it was more out of necessity. It was more from a place of, okay, I have anxiety. I can't seem to focus. It came from like a place where I knew that my normal state of consciousness, my state of awareness, that there was something where I wasn't able to actually be present in it. So I just was curious. It really started out of curiosity. And I had read a lot of different types of spiritual books, and certain books really kind of stood out to me. One of them being Autobiography of the Yogi was a book that I read, and it talks about Kriya Yoga, and I was just fascinated. And I began kind of taking the steps on that journey to learn the steps of Kriya Yoga, which is a very specific meditation path. And there's
Can you spell that for me, Andrea? Sorry,
Kriya?
Yes.
Kriya.
Okay.
And obviously there's millions of different types of meditation, many different types of mindfulness, mantra meditations, and really it's just finding something that works for you. But that was something that just really spoke to me at a really deep level that it's hard for me to explain, because it was something like from my heart. It was just so deep. I knew it. And I started to meditate, and I just started noticing just my level of reactivity which would shift. It was like I was able to be more present. I was able to feel more in touch with my intuition. And then I became, I'm a very curious person. So I studied like more about neuroscience and wanting to understand how the brain works in the states of meditation, and just how much it affects the health as well, because it also works with your nervous system. And then my journey started to kind of progress down this interesting route where I was pretty avidly meditating, but I noticed I was still having a lot of trauma response. And that's when I started exploring, which I mentioned to you, which is the parts work, which is internal family systems, which is a therapy modality that blends basically like shadow work, inner child work, somatic trauma work into one. And it allows us to integrate. I think for me, that was something that was sort of missing on my meditation path, although it was super helpful and amazing, and it's a big part of my life. I also wanted to make sure I was, dealing with the parts of myself and the things that I hadn't really looked at yet.
Are there a bunch of toys inside our toy box, and some of them are really tightly wound up and rattling along and jumping all over the place, and some of them are just waiting to be played with and they know their role, and some of them are completely demolished and don't get played with anymore at all, and some of them are your favorite toy. Are we a toy box with all kinds of toys inside, and that's what a part is? And then once you have all your toys optimized, then the box is a happier place?
I mean, I love that, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good analogy. But basically, we have these facets of our personality. And our personality was basically created in a way to avoid pain and to seek safety. And
our personality was created in order to avoid pain.
Yeah, for the most part. We have these several different qualities that were created mainly in childhood based on our subconscious programming. And we learned that depending on, some of us had very different programming, but conditional love, where I know that when I'm good, I get love. When I'm bad, I don't get love. So a lot of us have basically curated subconsciously our personalities. And we've learned, oh my goodness, like when I am really sweet, I get my mom's attention. When I'm angry, I get locked in my room. And so what happens, and I don't think parents mean to do this. Again, we're all learning these things. But what happens is we learn to basically disown these parts of ourselves. Like the toy goes in the back in the toy box that we don't want. Okay, I can't be angry because if I'm angry, then I get in trouble or whatever happens. Some people have worse consequences. So, and then as we get older, we start to have these patterns. And basically, if you look at your life is a reflection of your patterns. And most people think it's just things happening. But for the most part, it's our energetic patterns playing out. So this idea of the toy box, like you mentioned, is that we have all these facets of our personality, and they are basically protectors. They're protecting us from pain that we felt as children, which is perhaps like abandonment or betrayal or rejection, all these things that we have are not enough, these really painful things that we aren't true, but we believe about ourselves. And so these parts of ourselves are protecting us from feeling those beliefs again. And so, yeah, a lot of what I do in the parts work side of things is creating this space and getting in touch with the part of yourself that is the unconditionally loving aspect of us that we all have. We can call it Atman, we can call it Buddha-like, we can call it the higher self, loving awareness. It's the essence of love. And when we can create that or create a space within ourselves and touch that parts of ourselves, we can hold space for maybe that part that we threw down, that toy that you mentioned in the toy box that we go, oh, I don't like this toy anymore. I'm not allowed to play with this toy because...
Still taking up space, though.
But it's taking up space, and what happens is that part's going to come out and hijack. Right? We have these procrastinator parts or these angry parts that come out when they're triggered, and they're coming to protect us, but we're not consciously aware of it. So for me, this was like a missing link to my healing.
That understanding, the parts work understanding?
Yeah, because there was still some painful emotions that I just didn't want to go there. And I think with meditation, I was training my brain, which was wonderful. But there was still subconscious material that was coming up, but I didn't know how to handle it. And I think most people, they're like, I don't know how to meditate. I hear that a lot from people. I don't know how to meditate. And it's because a lot of times it's really hard to sit with yourself, because what happens is a lot of your subconscious material will come up during those moments of silence. So people would rather distract themselves. So it's like, how can we work with our subconscious material that's coming up to our conscious awareness to be looked at in a way that provides curiosity and safety? And for my personal journey, it's been something that has been super instrumental in me feeling more integrated and more peaceful and more whole and more loving. Because when I have something come up that's really difficult, instead of suppressing or numbing it away, which there's nothing wrong with that, those are just coping strategies. But how can I look at it as an opportunity to integrate that? And what I do is I just say, I'm noticing I'm feeling this way. And I basically just have a lot of curiosity, and I ask it, and I give it a lot of space, and I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to make it go away. I'm just trying to give it space. And what I like about parts work too, that ties in with my background as a filmmaker and a storyteller and an actor and a writer, all the things I used to do, is that we get to anthropomorphize these parts. We personify. And when we're able to look at them in that way, it can create a relationship, right? Because I think that's how we learn, is through relationship.
Mm.
And so basically we're creating a relationship with the parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't had in the past.
Is that something that is taught to people when they are exposed to parts work in, say, like a therapeutic setting? Is that like a technique that's utilized? Like when you're angry, scream into your pillow. When you want to understand these aspects of your behavior that might seem like they are autopilot aspects, whether it's like a young child that's prone to, I don't know, at what age do they start like implementing an understanding of parts work in a therapeutic setting?
Well, if you're specifically working with a parts work therapist, you do learn some of these, you understand kind of the language around it and how to work with it. It would be great if we taught this to children. I think it would be incredible. The movie Inside Out and Inside Out 2, I don't know if you've seen those movies, but they're actually parts work movies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they basically turn these like emotions that we all have into basically characters with their own thoughts, their own beliefs, their own motivations, just like we have within ourselves. Sometimes they're different ages.
Okay, so you've got an awareness, but for the audience that's just getting introduced to you, where do you see like the application of knowledge? Like you're working towards you're conducting classes now, right?
Yeah. So
tell us about the schooling and the.
Yeah, so I'm a meditation teacher. That's what I teach people meditation from a certain lineage that I learned. Which is very near and dear to my heart. And then I'm also incorporating parts work, as I mentioned, in a way so people have another tool to deal with some of it. Because when you meditate, you start to create a relationship with yourself, and sometimes it's a little rocky.
Because you're aware of yourself through
because
meditation.
You become more aware.
No distractions.
And our culture today is distraction, 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 distraction. And my belief is like your relationship with yourself predicates every other relationship you have in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we want to have a better relationship with our loved ones, our family, romantic, we have to start with our relationship with ourselves first. End of story. I'm really adamant on it. This is just my belief. I could be wrong. But from what I've seen in myself, I think that the relationship and the way we hold ourselves, and the way we honor ourselves, it's going to be reflected back in our relationships. And the more that we accept the parts of ourselves, and the more that we look at our shame and our pain, and the more that we hold space for ourselves, the more we can do that for others, the more we can do that for others, the people that we judge.
Let's talk about anxiety for a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's something that comes up. It's something that people are aware of.
Yeah.
It's a term kind of like the universe or spirits, which is like extraordinarily all-encompassing and abstract and frustrating at times. But I don't know that I could have had the most skillful relationship with myself earlier in my life, specifically early 20s, because of the static that was on my screen, which I would call anxiety.
Yeah.
That was, it's how fortunate we are to be able to have like a peaceful median in order to like assess like what's the best move for us at any given moment. Like when you're dominated by anxiety, it's so hard to make well-informed, skillful choices that are self-loving and compassionate towards others.
100%.
And so like I got medicated early on. And that continues to be a big part of my life and my consideration of why behaviors happen and how choices are arrived at, and what constitutes our physiology. But I think like even now, where let's talk about young people for an example, like people who are experiencing this surge of feelings and this surge of considerations and doubt and questions, and everything is really hyper dramatic, right? It's easy for us, I think, in this country, in this day and age, to call something something and put the medicine on it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I don't know where the philosophy or the lyricism of an understanding such as parts work, or understanding what intuition is, or understanding internal family systems. What are young people like being exposed to now? Have you had students at this point? Are you seeing people that are in our peer group, or are there people coming who are dealing with? Because I think that's part of a lot of people's journey is like, as they're coming into their own and their brain's still forming and they're moving out of adolescence and childhood into this like adult world, like it's such a volatile place, right? So, and I guess that's partly an eons old rite of passage state of being, but like, how early can these techniques really start to work in order to like help people diffuse physiological or emotional realities that are holding them back from living their best lives?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. And, I think that going back to what you mentioned about anxiety, usually anxiety is a part of us that feels deeply unsafe. And there can be a plethora of reasons why we feel unsafe. It could be, unhealed trauma. It could be nervous system dysregulation from physiology. It could be environment. It could be a lot of different things, but it's a signal to our body. And a lot of people that have anxiety, they kind of live up in their head because the sensations of the bodies seem overwhelming. So what we'd want to do with something like anxiety is learn to have a relationship with it and just start to be curious about what it's saying to us. What do we feel in our body? What are we noticing? What are we noticing in our body? Because a lot of times I find people that have a lot of anxiety, and as somebody that also went through a similar journey as you'd have, we've talked about this before, is getting back into our bodies in a way that feels safe, though. Because I think sometimes when you haven't, it can be overwhelming. So there's got to be some kind of, titration into it. But it's learning to have that relationship with the anxiety and what it's trying to protect you from. And where do you not feel safe? Where do you not feel seen? Where do you not feel loved? And when I'm feeling anxious, I just basically just turn to myself and I just say, what am I noticing? What am I needing right now? And usually it's a younger part of me that's scared of something because something in the external triggered something, or maybe I feel like I need to control something because I'm afraid if I don't control it, then something bad is going to happen, because that's what happened to me as a child. So it's learning to understand ourselves in a way, but from like a compassionate lens, which is why I love the parts work, which one of my mentors talks about the difference between like shameful self-awareness and loving self-awareness. Because sometimes I've noticed people start working on themselves and like, oh my God, I have all these terrible patterns and all these issues and all this trauma. And what happens is they use that as another reason to like shame themselves. Like, I'm not enough. Oh my gosh, I have all these issues, versus coming from this lens of love and being like, what's going on within me? What's going on inside of me? And then going back to your other part about today with the younger generation and these children, being thrust into this world as adults, and they have all these things to worry about, and just, we're constantly being distracted. I mean, if you look at people's brain scans and brain waves, people's brains are all over the place. Like, we haven't learned to work with the energies of our body. We haven't learned to work with our physiology. We're not taught this stuff. We're not taught emotional regulation skills. And they're so vital. They're so vital for our success in the world. They're vital for our health. They're vital for our relationships. So, I mean, that's why I'm so adamant on the work that I do and, integrating, because it also, it reflects outwards, right? It's like, for me, when I'm in a place of peace and love, then I'm going to be able to be probably a better support to people in my life. And I've noticed that I am, because before, when I used to be an anxious mess all the time, I try to give from an empty cup. But I was doing it from a place of fear. I was doing it from a place of not enough. I was doing it from a place of people pleasing. And so when I've kind of taken a couple steps back and go, okay, I'm just going to allow whatever's here to be here, then it creates this like space within myself that I can integrate these parts of myself where I don't need to really do anything on the outside. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I don't need to like try to change something on the outside to make me feel good inside. It's like I'm doing the work internally. And that's what shifts my external. I don't know if that answered your question. I was trying to touch the points about the anxiety and then the tools for like, you know, some of the younger generation.
Yeah, I think just sometimes that a sensation like anxiety can be such a powerful force that it can eradicate like all like skillful efforts to contend with it, but or maybe you don't have this. If you don't have the skillful efforts in hand or studied, you have a lower chance of even. It's such a powerful force.
It is, but it's trying to get your attention. Like anxiety is like, hey, I need some attention. Like it's and I think we learn to like avoid and numb it out instead of actually like honoring what's like there's something that feels out of alignment, whether it's physically or mentally or psychologically.
Where are you finding that people are speaking to each other skillfully and compassionately? Are you seeing this in are you part of a Sangha? Is that a word that makes sense for you? Yeah.
Well, I'm part of a spiritual community. We're amazing people, beautiful, beautiful souls. And then, you know, just in my curiosity of all the stuff I'm interested in, I do meet other people that are also interested in the same things.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of us are seeing that we need to be the examples we want to see in the world. And it starts with us. And that's, I think, really great to start seeing people taking that self-responsibility and learning tools to show up better for yourself and for others and learning these, you know, learning conscious communication skills. And
well, it kind of got me thinking when you were talking about the self-deprecating language that we use, you know, and the more I sit behind the board here, podcast producing, and I'm bearing witness to such a great deluge of language and words and speaking. I just think, you know, I love remembering that we talk about spelling words. And I love that because to me that's so weird. It's so magical. Spelling, casting a spell, spell casting through our language, you know. Yeah, using our language and I just was kind of wondering about intentional containers where we can let our language be. I think music has always been that for me.
yeah.
And I think that that's part of my practice is first of all, music itself is feeling without words a lot of the time, you know? So it's it delivers emotional value without, and I think it can kind of get into you in a more effective and subversive manner because you're not like gummed up with trying to decipher the code of the language. Yeah.
Yeah. It can take you out of the analytical brain and it can put you in like a flow state, as you would call it, or a different brainwave state. And I won't nerd out with talking about chakras, but
how are chakras, please?
Just for me, I think music is like one of the best ways to open the heart chakra. It's like when you allow the music to just like penetrate your body, you can feel it, you know, and sometimes you'll listen to, you know, just some words of some song can just like, you feel seen in a song and it'll just open your heart. I think music's a very powerful medium for healing. And I think the expression of music, I think art and creativity is a hugely powerful healing, you know, technique as well. I mean, we're all creators, whether we know it or not, but the act of expression of art, which I know you're a musician, and that's been a huge part of your, you know, your gifts and like your sharing of your truth. And I mean, I think music can transcend our brain that wants to figure things out all the time. I call them the figure out parts, the analytical parts, can kind of bypass those and kind of go to the right to the heart.
What's the difference between our subconscious and our intuition by your understanding?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a broad topic, but I'll try to simplify it. But basically, we have 3 states of awareness. And as I mentioned, consciousness at the beginning, including everything that exists. But in our specific conversation, consciousness being a state of awareness, meaning state of awareness. We have subconscious mind, which is where 95% of basically everything we do comes from, which is why parts work to me is so important, because we learn to work with our subconscious. And then we have our conscious waking mind, which is our analytical brain. And the subconscious is more of our reptilian limbic brain. So it's back here, it's more reactionary. And when, we are triggered or something, what happens is our reptilian reactionary brain comes online, and we kind of almost don't even have conscious awareness of how we're acting. We'll just react, right? So that's our subconscious. Also, when we're dreaming, our subconscious communicates with us. I have fascinating dreams. So subconscious, we have that come up. And then the conscious mind just being like our beta waves, which is just like our, us having a conversation. And then we have the super conscious mind, which is where I think we're evolving to being able to be in that state more often, which is the newest part of our brain. It comes, this prefrontal cortex, spiritual eye as well, which can talk a whole podcast about that. But so the intuition is coming from a higher mind, and subconscious is more of our protective behaviors, and it lives in our body. So a lot of this is like it basically remembers everything you've ever experienced in life.
Okay,
is your subconscious mind, anything you've ever experienced, and then your intuition is this higher part of your mind that like it might not make sense to anyone else, but it makes sense to you, and you just know it. It's like when I read that book, I just knew that I needed to take Kriya Yoga.
Or do you see yourself as an ascetic at this point, or?
I mean, I think for me, what you get to a point where you start to integrate more and more, and you become less identified with any of it. You're like, okay, cool, I'm going to step into this identity today because it feels fun. And I think you can explore. You can just say like, what seems exciting for me to try out. I mean, I don't know if I would identify myself as like even when I say I'm a meditation teacher, I mean, it's something I do and it's something I share as a part of me that feels so deeply resonant because it's been so instrumental in my path. But I also, have other parts of myself that I really enjoy.
Let's talk about psychedelics.
Okay.
And your experiences with psychedelics. I think you and I've enjoyed visiting with you over the past couple of years about observations that we've made of the landscape. Why did you even know about a psychedelic landscape? Like how did it come up for you? What was your experience? Like when did that become something that you could like talk to me about starting 2.5 years ago?
I know, it's so funny because I went through my whole life not doing any, like I smoked pot like maybe a couple, like sometimes.
Did you like pot?
I didn't like pot.
You didn't like it because why?
I just felt like I was really out of it, or I would be paranoid, or I'd go to sleep.
Yeah.
It wasn't my drug.
Yeah. And
I actually liked to drink. That was like what I liked. I liked alcohol.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't even drink that much. I'm really sensitive to things.
Yeah.
And then I stopped drinking years ago because my body's so sensitive. But the reason I got into psychedelics is I did ketamine as part of my healing.
That's right.
And I did, oh my gosh, and that was crazy because I had never experienced any altered state of consciousness besides like this was next level. I had never experienced like completely out of body K-hole. I mean, I was talking to God. I was like, became a tree. Thought I was an angel for like 3 days.
You said ketamine was part of your healing.
It was. I did it therapeutically.
What are you trying to heal from?
Well, I can go back into that. But I myself was dealing with a pharmaceutical drug brain injury from medication, from pharmaceutical antidepressants that destroyed me, as we've talked about, that I was healing my brain from. And part of one of the doctors suggested ketamine therapy, and I tried it out.
What kind of doctor suggested that?
I think it was a psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist?
Yeah, which I won't talk about my opinions of psychiatry right now. But
you were working with a psychiatrist in dealing with the problems you were having with coming off the prescription.
Yeah, and then I ended up
antidepressants.
working more with like the natural path
Yeah.
route.
Whoever is watching this show who has, because this has been a big part of like our shared conversation on this space. Like, so whoever's watching or listening to this show who has taken prescription antidepressant medication and then for whatever reason had difficulty in the cessation of that medication, Andrea and I in particular are well aware of the perils of that. And I think that I'll be very appreciative if she'll share a little bit more about her story and coming off prescription antidepressant medication. Because here's the deal, like I think that it can be said that can have a positive effect for people, that that there's enough evidence to indicate that can be part of wellness for people, right? It can be.
I won't agree, but
Okay, well, I think like people will say that they see benefit from taking their prescription antidepressant medication.
yeah, I probably won't agree with that. Specifically, more and more I learned about trauma and like the different iterations. I think, maybe for extreme circumstances, but I think for the most part, they use it as the first line of defense, which I think is very dangerous when it's so many other things need to be looked at first, which is physiology, environment. Are you honest with yourself? Are you telling yourself lies about your life and what you're in? Are you in an unhealthy relationship?
Well, again, like going back in time, like what have 22, 21, 23-year-old people done?
Yeah.
What work have they done? Where have they been supported? How have they been equipped to consider everything that they're contending with?
Yeah.
So my what I was getting to was that whether or not you've determined that it could be of benefit to you, there's no structure in place for ending the medication.
No, there's not. And I think there's a lot of poor education around what happens to people. I think they're beginning to look into it more, but a lot of the long-term studies, there's no long-term studies, and there was no kind of solution on how to get people off of these drugs. I myself, like yourself, was put on very young. I should not have been. From a 10-minute conversation with a gynecologist.
A fucking 10-minute conversation. 10-minute conversation here too with this, like a specialist on anxiety and depression.
Mine wasn't even an expert. Mine was just like, hey, this is a new drug. You want to try it?
A gynecologist.
Yeah, when I was 19. So, and that's a different era. I think they're a little, I don't know if they're better now, actually. But,
who knows?
But yeah, and I was just unhappy. I was an engineering major, and I wanted to be an artist. I was not cut out to be an engineer. My mind loved learning and understanding physics and science and math, and I was quite good at it. But I was unhappy. And instead of looking at why I was unhappy in my life, I was put on these drugs. And again, I can own that I chose that as well, but given like the very ignorant consciousness that I had at the time. And
to be fair, like that's what we do when we grow up. We go to the doctor and we get prescribed something for something that comes up. So we're trying to do what's right.
Right. I mean, at that time, back in the day, I would take an antibiotic for this, a Tylenol. I was so ignorant to my own health and like would eat fast food. Drinking. I had just a terrible health situation happening. So anyways, fast forward to, 2 decades later. I had tried a couple times to
Don't fast forward too fast though. Let me think, because the part of the reality here is the big picture. It's year to year continued use of something that you feel is you're taking in order to make your life better.
No, it's not. I did not. I was numb. And I only know that now that I'm completely off and I feel my intuition and I feel my sensations. I was numb. I was basically altered to not feel my nervous system anymore. And what happened was when I was put on them, I didn't care about anything as much as I cared about before I was on them. And so I didn't care that I was an engineer. I didn't want to be an engineer. I kept going through my classes. Yeah, I was a lot less anxious. And, my sadness was a little bit dulled out. But then I was never excited anymore either. So I don't think it improved my life. I think, and then I went into acting, and I think it affected that too, because as an actor, you want to have full range access to your emotions. And I didn't. I remember being like, I want to feel this, but I, for some reason, feel like a block. And so I have my very specific perspective of medication. I'm, and it's very personal to me because of my experience, and I almost died from them. So it's like I'm coming from a place of trauma from them as well.
Yeah.
So I don't want to like project my experience and say that everybody, that people might have completely different experiences. There's a lot of people that have had my experiences that I've connected with. And I think there needs to be more, like any pharmaceutical product, there needs to be informed consent. There needs to be understanding on how to get off something, what it does, what the side effects are, what the alternatives are. Have we looked at all the different ways that we can address the issues? Psychiatry is one of the few, areas of medicine where they don't actually look at a scan of the organ. They don't look at blood tests.
Yeah.
They don't do a psych evaluation as far as like true psych evaluation, not just like a DSM test that was created by the pharmaceutical company in the 90s. Like, are you been depressed for 2 weeks? Are you feeling sad? Are and then you check it off and like, oh, you now fit the diagnosis for depression. I mean, what if somebody's parent just died or their dog just died? Maybe they're in grief. And we have a completely grief-phobic relationship in our society where we don't really allow people to grieve properly. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work I do, because I realize how we weren't taught to work with our emotions.
Yeah.
We were taught to suppress and ignore and deny and put a mask on and act like we're okay.
Yeah, or we're really only encouraged to encounter and consider those emotions that are easy to swallow.
Yeah.
And that serve whatever immediate commercial function is at hand.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. You're more liable to go along if you're blissful, and there's a lot of quick fixes for that.
Quick fixes. And look, pain is not easy, and I look at it like anybody that has an addiction to you are trying to feel better. So when somebody's in deep pain and they feel like there's a solution, and this happens to be in a pill, and it makes you feel better, that's like you're trying to make yourself feel better. The thing is, my point is the pain is telling you something, and numbing it out doesn't make it go away. Because guess what happened to mine? Mine came back with a raging storm because I suppressed a lot of my stuff for 20 years.
So part of your difficulty in trying to end the medication was the emotional reality that came up at that time?
Well, I think part of it was, as I mentioned, I think as all of us are young people, we don't know who we are yet. And we're still deciding, our majors and all these things. And then we're also dealing with interpersonal relationships. And for me, I think my patterns of protection and trauma were more perfectionism, pleasing. And I would just kind of suppress a lot of the parts of myself, like my sadness, and I'd be like, oh, people don't like when I'm sad, so I'm just not going to be sad. And again, as I mentioned, I was in engineering as an engineering major. I really enjoy learning how things work, but I didn't want to be an engineer. And I was having this existential crisis where I was in this major. I was on a full ride scholarship for it. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be an artist. So I was taking psychology classes and painting and theater and costume design, and I was loving that. But there was really I don't think a particularly good reason for me to be put on pills. I was making straight A's. I had a ton of friends. I was dating. I had a job. That's not a profile of somebody that's needing to be on medication.
Right. But I tried to suggest earlier that you continued taking the medication.
Because I couldn't get off.
So it became you continued taking it because you couldn't get off.
I couldn't.
Pretty early on into that 2-decade stretch.
I tried 5 times. I tried so hard every time, and then I would have what I mentioned before we talked about akathisia, which is horrible, and I'd have these seizure-like symptoms, and I would have severe insomnia, and I had a ton of side effects every time. But it's the withdrawal symptoms that were happening.
Yeah. How soon, Andrea, into taking it did you start experiencing trying to stop taking it and then getting sick?
I tried a couple years after to get off of it.
Yeah.
And then I would have these really interesting nervous system responses that I didn't know what was happening at the time, and no doctor could describe it. So they're like, oh, your original symptoms are returning. So then I would get put back on a medication.
Yeah.
And of course it would go away right away, which shows that it was a withdrawal symptom.
Yeah.
And they're highly dependent. Your body becomes very dependent on these chemicals, and they also affects your autonomic nervous system. And for some people, they get tardive dyskinesia or akathisia, and it's really scary when that happens. And you also get brain zaps, which feels like your brain is being electrocuted. And because I wasn't tapered off properly, they would just take me off. I was having these severe experiences. So I had tried many, many times to get off of it, and this last time I was hell bent on getting off of it, which I did.
Yeah, you did. You did. And you still contend with some of the side effects of that are lingering.
I mean, it's been several years. I mean, it's been like 4 years now, I think, or 3 years. But 4 years. Yeah, I would say that there's some brain fog stuff that I still have. I mean, I had dementia-like symptoms for about a year. And I had severe insomnia for a year.
Yeah.
Where I slept a couple hours a night, if that. I lost a ton of weight. I lost 20 pounds. I had no appetite. I had uncontrollable shaking, which is really scary. It looked like I was having a seizure. My pupils in my eyes were completely dilated at all times. So my eyes looked black because my pupils were so dilated. I couldn't remember anything. I was terrified. It was terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend, Carla, who is working with women specifically who are looking to come off their prescription antidepressant medications. Do you think that there are more resources available now for people who become aware of some of the things that they might have to deal with when they aspire to, change?
Yeah, I think that the beautiful thing about social media and the internet is there's a lot more resources now. At the time, I was trusting my doctor's guidance. I was taken off way too quickly is why I had such severe response.
Yeah.
But there's ways to do it that are healthy, and I don't mean to scare people. There are some really beautiful practitioners that are super educated in this space that I've connected with that are incredible, that know a lot about amino acid therapy to help you make sure that you have proper balance of serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, while your brain is readjusting to not having this chemical in your body, making sure that your minerals aren't depleted, your vitamins, like your B vitamins, your magnesium. There's a lot of things you can do that I was not doing that also caused a lot of harm for me.
So let's talk about then the radical reality shift of a psychedelic therapy introduction and you becoming a tree and angels and aliens.
Yeah. So this was part of my kind of healing this injury of my brain at the time. And I did some psychedelic ketamine therapy with a therapist and without. But the first time I did it, it was like,
this is intramuscular or
I did IV and IM.
Okay.
Yeah, I did both, and I liked the IV a lot. I really enjoyed the experience.
You're in a clinic, you're laying down, or you're in a chair with 3/4, and it's being administered in a incremental fashion.
Mm-hmm. It was really interesting because it was like the first time I had experienced anything out of body. Like with no identity. Andrea didn't exist. It was just pure experiencing oneness and consciousness and love. And I remember feeling like I was connected to the stars, and I became a tree, and I felt so part of nature. And then when I was out of the experience, I started to become really aware of like the part, like when I wasn't being honest with myself too. So it created this like, just this perspective of wanting to be really honest about who I was and what I wanted.
What was the goal of that, introducing that modality into this effort to titrate safely or heal from the injury?
What happened was, I had bottomed out so hardcore with what was going on physically, and I probably had like no serotonin in my brain. I was dealing with such dark, deep, depth depression moods because of just what was going on in physiology that they wanted to just help kind of catapult me out of that state, which it did. The thing is, it wasn't, I would say, sustainable because I still had to heal my brain.
The ketamine sessions catapulted you out of a very dark, immediate depressive state.
Yes, that I found myself in, being completely taken off of these medications very quickly. And then I was still having all these like physical responses at the time. So this was one of the solutions they suggested.
Yeah, a lot of the time of you having come off the medication was you just like dealing with the side effects, dealing with the injury, right? Like job stuff is screwed up, social life is screwed up, like it just doesn't look like you at all living your life.
No, I couldn't. I was basically, I would say, incapacitated for about a year.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't have cognition.
Yeah.
I couldn't work. I couldn't visit with people. It was very scary. So the ketamine helped, I think. I mean, it was the first, like I mentioned, it was the first time I had done any kind of psychedelic anything. And I also did work with a therapist at one point with one of the sessions or two of the sessions. That was helpful.
Somebody sitting in the room with you and talking about how you felt and the conclusions you were drawing. And
Yeah, which was nice. And then there was a period where I didn't do any kind of psychedelics. And then once I was in a better state, I started to microdose psilocybin and it kind of dipped into some mushroom journeys.
The little mushroom
Little
dipping.
mushrooms.
And that was because it was good for you?
Yeah, well, I had done a lot of research on how to kind of heal some of the neural pathways of my brain and from what I experienced. And there were some people that suggested some microdosing. Paul Stamets has a really great protocol. So I did that for a while, which I think was helpful. And I really enjoy just my own state, so I don't find myself being drawn to psychedelics as much.
Yeah.
Recently.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll do a little bit of mushrooms here and there, and just like heart opening, and it feels so lovely. Sassafras, I love too. Another great heart opener once in a while, and then I did ayahuasca as well once.
I wonder how dreaming factors into our consciousness, non-ordinary or extraordinary states of consciousness, because I certainly know that dreams can feel pretty extraordinary at times. And you mentioned earlier that you enjoy your dreams for the most part. And you told me when you showed up tonight that you had lucid dreams recently specifically. So tell us about Andrea's dreams.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a whole topic. But, Carl Jung talks a lot about dreams and shadow work. And I find there's a lot of symbolism in dreams. And so I've been really kind of delving into that realm and paying attention to what's showing up. And the characters in our dreams can represent parts of ourselves as well, which is really fascinating. And probably in about a year and a half ago, I started lucid dreaming, which I think is a effect of meditation, which is you wake up when you're dreaming, but you're still asleep, but you're aware that you're dreaming. And you basically can control what's happening in the dream, which is very fascinating. And of course, what would you do if you were a lucid dreamer?
Darks.
That's what happened. So I started out lucid dreaming. That's like all I was doing. I was like, which celebrity am I going to, whatever. Had a lot of fun. And then sometimes I would be like, oh, I'm dreaming. I'm going to go shopping. And then I would create this like jewelry store and buy like 300,000. I'm not even that into that, but it's funny. Like what would happen?
Fortnite.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy this diamond necklace. But yes, so that's what I started doing. And then kind of researched a little bit more into lucid dreaming, and there's like different levels and things you can do. And so then I started actually like having conversations with people that I had like maybe like a conflict that hadn't been repaired or something. So I'd bring them up in my consciousness and my dreams, and we would work it out, which was, I think, amazing.
That's wild.
I would bring up my old dog that passed away, and I'd visit with him. And then I learned about something called Tibetan sleep yoga, which is pretty interesting. You learn to meditate in your dreams. So I started to meditate in my dreams, which is really cool. Like waking up and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to meditate. And I had a really interesting one last night, actually. So I would have this recurring dream for a very long time, for as long as I can remember, where I would see a mirror in my dream, and I would go up to the mirror and I would turn into a demon.
You would turn into a demon.
I would turn
Your
into
reflection.
a demon. And it was very scary.
Yeah.
And
I bet you're a pretty demon.
I know, this was a really just terrifying demon. It's terrifying. And I'd have this dream. I've had this for years, even when I was younger, I think. And last night, I had a dream. And in the dream, the mirror was there. And I looked over to the mirror and I saw the demon. And I go, I'm dreaming. I'm dreaming. What do I want to happen here? I said, I love you to the demon. I said, I love you. The demon changed to different demons, and like the demons kept getting like cuter and cuter and sweeter. And then the demons turned into just a mask, and you could see my face underneath it. And I just kept saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. Yeah, it was really amazing. And I think it's like the shadow work, like the parts of myself. Like I have a whole thing I think about demons anyways. I think they're just the unknown aspects of ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's really powerful. I was like, wow, that was so... I woke up and I was like, wow, that was fascinating. That I like knew how to handle that in my dream, even though I was lucid and aware, but I was still sleeping and took myself through that whole experience.
I love it. It's interesting to think about. I like the Jacob's Ladder take on demons too, as how did it say? It's actually demons are angels helping you find your way to the light. You know, like or the notion of just even they are serving a purpose for the soul's evolution.
Yes, yes. I mean, demons. I think there's an ancient Buddhist practice called feed your demons, and it's very similar to heart's work, and it's learning to love the demons, and what a demon represents is what you mentioned.
You know, I don't really want to think that we live in a world that really is based on the fact that a witchy looking thing is unpleasant, you know, or, you know, like it has to be like that physical reality really is like not a good thing, because maybe it's just a different thing, you know.
Well, I think it's the judgment too. I mean, I think this idea that we judge, this is good, this is evil, it's just this very binary way that we think of things. And then what happens is when you have judgment and hierarchy, it's just a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself as well.
Yeah.
So then you have parts that you're like, oh, these are good parts of me, these are bad, these are evil parts of me. And so, I mean, look at what's going on in the world. I mean, I feel like that's an example of what happens when we judge.
I appreciate you, and it's always awesome to hear about the joy that you're finding in the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I really have just been following my own curiosity and following what excites me and what's interesting to me, what's fascinating. And, you know, as I've opened my heart more and more and just feel so much more peace, I want to share that.
Yeah.
You know, I want people to have those experiences as well, because I think at the end of the day, you know, we live in there's a lot of chaos going on right now. And I think finding some kind of peace and having a healthy relationship with yourself is vital right now.
If someone wanted to connect with you, ask questions, participate in a class, learn more about the things you enjoy, how would they do that?
I mean, I'm happy to share my Instagram. It is private. I'm working on revamping my Instagram. That's some area I do need help with. I'm not the best at social media, but but I'm happy to.
Do you have a teaching brand for yourself just yet?
I do. I just haven't launched it yet.
Okay. Okay, we'll share that. And when you do come online fully with that.
Yeah, I have a page. I haven't done anything with it, but that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. You're welcome to use anything from this conversation as part of that if you think that'd be applicable.
Yeah.
But I've seen, you know, I've been able to visit with you before about the meditation specifically and some other stuff that we've created. And I think your background as a communicator and storyteller does position you well to be able to help people learn and incorporate techniques. So I'm excited for you in that regard, and to see how your practice continues to grow, and of all the kick-ass things that you're going to be able to do to help other people find benefit as well.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate that. And I want people to just be able to feel good in their bodies and feel like they have a purpose. And that doesn't need to be anything grandiose, but just like, finding that part within themselves that's deep, that is just unconditionally loving. And it's just so freeing when you can operate from that space. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.